Hello, coming to you from the rocking city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, DJ Bryce. Tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 48. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring 7 Wonders Duel out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off both aeon'send and Coup. On the reaction segment, I discuss a couple of recent announcements from CMON. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Hadara. On the Obscure Bryce Game segment, I review Catan History's Rise of the Inkas. And we wrap up the episode by counting down to my number 1 Table Hog Game. I had a chance to bring 7 Wonders Duel, the popular 2015 two-player-only iteration of 7 Wonders from designers Antoine Bauza and Bruno Cathala and publisher Repost Productions, out of the dust recently. I brought it out of the dust because I was in an intense card drafting mood. I last played it 2 years, 3 months, and 28 days ago, when the Pantheon expansion came out. I had mixed feelings on the expansion then, but after playing with it again, I've come to the opinion that I don't think it's a very good expansion. The new purple cards are just not an interesting replacement for the guilds, and while some of the god cards are interesting, they are rarely actually used, which kind of makes the expansion pointless. I say that despite, in my most recent play, I totally won thanks to a Pantheon card getting me access to the last science symbol I needed. But that was the only time I used any of the Pantheon cards. There are a fair amount of tokens, additional setup, and general bloat to the game to accommodate the Pantheon cards, and I just don't think the bloat is worth it for how seldom the expansion components get used. I'm going to consider getting rid of Pantheon and just keeping the base game. I've only ever done that for one game before, Choice, but 7 Wonders Duel might be the second. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Graham Dauncey, username GDAO, brought a couple of fun games out of the dust. First up was aeon'send, the hit 2016 deck-building game from Indie Boards and Cards and designer Kevin Riley. Graham last played it 1 year, 4 months, and 15 days ago and currently rates it a 6.8 out of 10. He writes, I first played this game solo, and whilst it works as a solo game, it didn't really grab me. This time I got a chance to play it co-op with a group of 4 and then 3. The game was much more interesting with the collaboration and the way things interact. It is a brutally hard game though, and I am still not overly taken by the theme. The mechanics and gameplay are good though. Next up was Coup, the Resistance Universe, the popular 2012 deduction game designed by Ricky Tata, and also from Indie Boards and Cards. Graham last played it 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day ago and currently rates it a 6.9 out of 10. He writes, I am generally pretty uninterested in social deduction games, but the more individualistic ones, which rely less on groupthink, are generally okay. Coup is in this category, so is one of the party games I am more happy to play. Still, doesn't get played that often. Most of my gaming colleagues are aware of my dislike of social deduction games, so don't force me to play them too often, fortunately. Thanks for the contributions, Graham. I'm with you on Coup. I am firmly anti-social deduction as well, but Coup is the one exception for me. For me, I like the psychological element to the game as bluffing takes center stage over any social interaction that might be present. And I like how Coup has a win condition to the game that doesn't necessarily involve having to actually figure out who everyone is. Reaction segment time. On the reaction segment this week, I'm going to examine a couple of recent CMON announcements. Teburu and Anhk. According to their press release, Teburu will be the next evolution in board gaming. Teburu is a gaming console that seamlessly integrates the physical and digital worlds, keeping players focused on the board and its components while the system takes care of game rules, enemies, behavior, and storytelling events. Okay, well, that's what everyone says. Let's not get crazy here. I'll believe that's what I see it. Now, my initial reaction to this statement is one of elitist board game snobbery. What? I don't want any digitalness tainting my pure analog experience! But I have to admit that apps and games have come a long way over the years, and while I might hate to admit it, sometimes apps really do enhance an experience. I actually liked First Martians, and the app integration in that was a positive experience for me. And that's all Teburu really seems to be, just a glorified app. The promotional pics CMON has shared about the possibilities of Teburu show physical game components on a digital board, and that's intriguing. Since it's CMON, the company has been naturally touting this system in regards to dungeon crawlers, a genre I don't typically enjoy in board game form, but I enjoyed the genre in digital form back when I played video games. So I can't help but wonder that if a system like Teburu removes the annoying and tedious parts of a dungeon crawler, like setup, monster management, and record keeping, would I enjoy the genre more? I shudder to think what the asking price of Teburu is going to be once it's ready to go, but I think I'd be up for giving it a spin if one of my friends invested in it. CMON also recently announced a new Eric Lang strategy game, Anhk, an Egyptian mythology-themed game. A lot of Eurogamers falsely see Eric Lang as the embodiment of Ameritrash games because of his well-known dungeon crawlers and because his games use really nice components. It's not a crime for a game to be beautiful, though. These gamers forget that many of his strategy games are grounded in solid Euro mechanics, like the action point allowance system in Chaos in the Old World, the card drafting in Blood Rage, the point salad in Rising Sun, and the worker placement in Godfather. It's because of this legacy of using Euro mechanics in innovative and visually attractive ways that I'm really excited for Anhk. It doesn't hurt that one of my wife's favorite themes is Egyptian mythology, so I know the game will get played at home. Weirdly, CMON announced this upcoming game during their currently ongoing Kickstarter for Eric Lang's new dungeon crawler, Trudvang, and it seems like a lot of backers are jumping ship in favor of waiting for Anhk. I wasn't planning on backing Trudvang myself because, as I mentioned, I'm not a dungeon crawler fan, but I don't blame these other backers for abandoning the current campaign. Anhk looks like a much more interesting project. Thank goodness CMON isn't planning on launching the Kickstarter for Anhk until later in the year. There are many projects I'm tempted by right now, and what I really need is some time to recover from all the other amazing projects I've already backed this year. This week on the What I Have Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Hadara, the new civilization building game from publisher Z-Man and designer Benjamin Schwer, who has several Habba games to his credit, but is best well known for 2009's Livingstone. I first learned the game at the pop-up Gen Con event here in Omaha at the Game Shop. Hadara has been getting a lot of comparisons to Seven Wonders. I don't usually like to compare games to other games, but the comparison is not completely unwarranted in this case. Like Seven Wonders, Hadara approaches civilization building in an abstract way through drafting cards and has a comparable complexity level. Here's how it works. Players draft cards from one of 5 different colored decks. Each deck specializes in a different aspect of civilization building. Food, economy, culture, military, and then there's an all-purpose 5th color, purple. The drafting works a little different than other drafting games. Each player will simultaneously draw 2 cards from a different colored deck, choose one to play or discard it for coins, and place the other in a discard pile for that deck. These cards will increase player standings on one of 4 tracks. Then, players will rotate their next draw to the next clockwise deck and repeat that process until all the cards are gone from all the decks. Each card costs a certain number of coins to bring into play in their tableau, but the cost is defrayed by 1 for each card of that color a player already possesses. After the decks run out of an era, players will earn money, have a chance to conquer territory tiles, and build statues. Then, players take turns drafting a card from the top of any discard pile until all of those are gone as well. Then, there's another income, conquer, and build phase. After 3 eras of cards, the game ends. Players earn points from the cards they've drafted, the territories they've conquered, the statues they've built, the money they have left over, and some set collection points based on the number of different, or same types of cards they have, if they purchase corresponding metal tokens during the course of the game. It's a point salad game, and each avenue of earning points appears to be well balanced from my limited play so far, which is what you want to see from a game like this. There's engaging strategy involved in deciding which cards to draft when. There's some nice tension and press your luck involved in the latter half of each round as players try to gauge which cards to draft from the tops of discard piles while hoping others might make it around to them again. I've quite enjoyed my plays of this so far, and I've added the game to my wish list. But it's not a Seven Wonders killer. Let's not get crazy here either. Anyone who says it is engaging in hyperbole. Hadara is a good game, but it's not replacing Seven Wonders. I think I could live comfortably side by side with it, though, and I would have room in my collection for both. Particularly, I think Hadara will excel at lower player counts, while Seven Wonders remain stellar for higher ones. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about Catan History's Rise of the Inkas. This is the most recent entry in the Catan line of games, but it's really flown under the radar and is only racking up a handful of log plays each month currently. It seems to be trendy nowadays to hate on Catan, but I still like it, and have many non-traditional opinions about the game, including you could totally play this two-player without any adjustments needed, and inter-player trading is not necessary at all for an enjoyable experience. I've really enjoyed many of the Catan spin-offs, so when this was on sale online recently for half off on Map Amnesty Day, it was an easy decision to pick it up. Like other Catan spin-offs, you'll find the traditional Catan elements of rolling dice to produce resources for everyone here, but there are a couple of things that make this game different than others. Instead of 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 trading posts on the border of the map, there are special resource areas that produce resources you can only use to trade in for building resources. This new take on trading with the bank would be enough to set the game apart from others, but there's something even more interesting in this edition: the rise and fall of tribes. What happens is that after a player has scored their 4th point, all their villages and cities go in decline. Players place these cool vine pieces over the village and city miniatures to denote this. Those places still produce resources as usual, but they can be replaced by other villages or cities, either from an opponent or from the player themselves. After a player scores their 8th point, those first 4 points of villages and cities are removed from the board entirely, if they haven't already been replaced, and the vine markers are moved to the 4 most recently scored points. There are no longest road or largest army or development card points, but those objectives and cards grant other bonuses and special abilities instead. The decline of tribes in the game is very fascinating and adds a whole new level of strategy to Catan, as players must weigh whether to expand into new areas, reclaim old ones, or replace opponents' areas, all while keeping an eye on which resources they are currently generating, with what numbers where, and which they might be losing in the near future. I really like this mechanic, and it elevates Rise of the Inkas to one of the best Catan spin-offs yet. I need to play it some more before I reach an ultimate conclusion, but Rise of the Inkas might be the very best Catan game yet. We continue my top 5 favorite Table Hog games countdown this week with number 1 on the list, Feast for Odin, O.A. Rosenberg's Viking-themed worker placement magnus opus, originally published in 2016 by Z-Man Games. There are worker placement games, and then there's Feast for Odin, the ultimate worker placement game. You know it's the ultimate worker placement game because there are 61 worker placement spots, and the Norwegians expansion adds even more. The game board with all of these worker placement spaces is actually not as large as one might think, but that's only a fraction of the playing space required. Next to the board, we need spaces for the round phase track, the display board of plunder tiles, at least 4 good-sized island tiles, 3 stacks of hut tiles, 3 stacks of boat tiles, a stack and display of resource tiles, piles of 3 different resource pieces, piles of silver coins in various denominations, a deck of weapon cards, a deck of occupation cards, a couple of dice, penalty tokens, and 2 large trays to hold the 16 different food and equipment tokens that the game revolves around. The player board is a standard size, but players also need space for the island and hut tiles they acquire, all the resources, food, and equipment they gather, and the tableau of cards they build. All of these things combined easily fill up any table I've played it on. And all of the space is, once again, as we've seen from the other Table Hog games in my list, absolutely necessary. Because this is an epic game and it requires an epic number of components to capture that feeling. I love it so much. Starting a game of Feast for Odin is like embarking on a grand adventure. It's always exciting to see how things play out. I particularly enjoy finding the best way to use the occupation cards I draw to strategic benefit. Using the cards, chaining together groups of Vikings to take actions, and placing all of those fun pieces on the player, island, and hut boards is an engaging, satisfying, and rewarding puzzle. There's nothing quite like manipulating the final pieces you've claimed or the final negative point spaces on your player board on the final turn of the game. The expansion is lots of fun too and shakes up the worker placement board in new ways. And the game even has one of the best Rosenberg solo modes to boot. Even though it's the typical Rosenberg try